You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatimah. For anyone listening out there not having a good day, please know there is help out there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Agile Ideas. I'm Fatimah, CEO at AMO, Mental Health Ambassador, and your host. Today, joining me on the podcast is Anton Roe. Anton is a recruitment and talent solutions leader with over 26 years experience across the UK, Europe, the US, and more recently, Australia and Asia Pacific. With a master's in organisational psychology, Anton is passionate about working with companies to solve their talent problems, from hiring to succession planning and everything in between. He's also an advocate for DE&I in technology and transformation. And in this episode, we delve into everything around psychology at work, work-life balance, AI and hiring, as well as what's going on in the market in terms of trends and what he's seeing when talking to clients across the talent and recruitment landscape. So stay tuned and please join me in welcoming Anton to the show. Anton, thank you for joining me. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Fatimah. It's great to see you again.
And I have already told everyone about your background and all your career highlights and all of them. I haven't really gone through that much detail, but I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the fact that you've been working in the last 25 years across so many different regions across the world. And I'm kind of keen to get a little bit more insight into how you landed from where you started in terms of what you studied and how you got into the career that you're in. Can you just take us back to kind of help set the scene?
Yeah, 100%. So I kind of stumbled into recruitment 26 years ago, so February 2000. And I often say this, and I know I sound like a dinosaur, but when I first came into recruitment, I'd never been on the internet and I'd never sent an email. How's that?
Age.
What's that, sorry?
Showing age.
Definitely show my age, but it's kind of relevant because I look at probably, and we can come on to this, but I look at some of the changes that we've seen in technology. And I think 2000 was quite a milestone, actually, because of Y2K and Millennium Bug and the kind of existential crisis that was spoken about. But I do feel fortunate that I came into industry, into a career before the internet, because it does give you a different perspective, particularly now when we're going through a different transition. But anyway, I fell into recruitment. Before that, like I'd done a kind of bunch of different sales type jobs, and I was drawn to recruitment because it was sales first and foremost. And I think what appealed to me in a sales job was that I knew that my effort equaled earnings. And always been, I guess, a relatively entrepreneurial person. Came from I sort of joke, I'm the only person in my family to ever have a job. And it doesn't mean they're all unemployed. It means they're all self-employed. They've all kind of got their own businesses and sort of do different things. But yeah, sort of fell into recruitment, and it was really not. I've been completely candid. It wasn't because I had a passion for recruitment. I didn't really know what it was. It was just a sales job. I was young. I was 21, and wanted to make some money, and was sort of keen. So I was fortunate that I joined a business that was run by some really good people, and not just good at what they do, but good ethically, good in terms of their investment in people that they brought in, the support, the kind of coaching, the nurturing, the not letting people get too big for their boots when they got some success, but equally not letting people get too low when things didn't go well. It's a very sort of good consistency of environment. And I was with that business for 16 years. And in that time, we grew from 15 people, roughly, when I joined, to when I left, we were 900.
Wow.
We went through an IPO, we went through a major acquisition, we opened into new markets internationally, and I ended up living in Texas and running a team across the Americas. And again, I always feel very fortunate there that I got to grow so much. I got to learn to be a recruiter, learn to be a team leader, learn how to hire people, onboard people, develop people, how to build strategies, how to go to market, how to sort of do so many different things, and then to learn about kind of cultural differences as well. So that was a phenomenal learning curve. And then I found myself in Texas about 2015, and coming to it towards the end of my 30s and probably having an early midlife crisis of sorts, of kind of thinking, well, what have I achieved? Where am I going from here? And I met my now wife, who's was from Geelong, and I ended up moving here for us to, I guess, look at doing life together. And yeah, that was 10 years ago. And which was again a leap of faith, probably to leave that organization, having achieved so much. But I'd also seen other people leave that company and go on and do some incredible things. And I thought, well, I could stay here comfortably for the rest of my career. But maybe comfort isn't the right thing. And every day I coach people about looking for jobs and advise them to get out of the comfort zone. So I moved here and actually joined Adecco Group, who are one of the biggest recruitment companies in the world. Spent a couple of years helping them to launch a new business into Australia. And again, that was a great learning experience. I realized probably through that it wasn't for me. It was too big. It was too kind of corporate. It was, I felt that my ability to influence and move the needle was much harder when it was in a business of that scale. And then an opportunity presented for me to go into a very small business of 10 people, to become an owner, to take an ownership stake with the two original founders, which was then Marshall McAdam, which became Ember. We went through a rebrand and very proud of what we achieved there. We grew that business to about 20, 25 people at its peak, brought some great people on the business. Many of those are still there now and leading that business. A different dynamic as being a business owner and learning, probably moving away from being a recruiter and more thinking about running a business and leading and owning a business and the different pressures that comes with. And that kind of run its natural course. And then a year ago, a great opportunity presented for me to go in and essentially become what I call like a second generation managing director in a post-acquisition and the founder's exit, and a business that needed to kind of be picked up, look at where there'd been a lot of success, and then kind of shape that and regrow it, which is I'm sort of 10 months in. So we're starting to see progress, but that's probably a 3 to 5 year project really to really get the maximum results. So interesting journey, different countries, different businesses at different phases, different things going on. So yeah, it's been an interesting 26 years for sure.
And you finally moved away from having a job and becoming your own entrepreneur. Your family will be proud about that.
Yeah, that's right. It's and again, I think probably what I learned from that is I definitely enjoyed it, but there is a but. It probably took me away from some of the things that I really enjoy doing, which is working with clients, working with candidates, working in the market, working more closely with people about themselves. Because I think, and you'd know this for sure, given your journey, but once you become a business owner, you're thinking about the payroll and the tax bill and the ATO, and
Absolutely.
every time the government changes the legislation, and you've suddenly got to consider what's the implications of this. And it sounds like it shouldn't be a big barrier, but it does. It takes away a certain amount of energy, and it does remove the ability to do certain things that maybe you got to that point because you enjoyed doing. And it's probably not a surprise when you look at the recruitment industry that there's 8,000 recruitment agencies in Australia, and 95% are less than 5 people. And that's because there's not many that actually do scale. There's not many that grow. It becomes more of a lifestyle business. For I think for those reasons, people don't want necessarily the pain of growing a business, but they want the independence of not being part of an organization.
And ultimately, it sounds like some of those smaller businesses, they like to stay in that technician role, the technician/manager role, as opposed to that entrepreneurial forward thing, which is fine. It works for some people. But you talked about scale. So obviously you've scaled a few times. In your first job, you scaled businesses said to about 900 people. As business owners and practitioners listening now, what would be some of those key lessons that you could share and impart on people like myself around the scaling journey? Because I think that's really relevant for anyone, whether they're scaling a business for the first time or joining a business and helping it scale. What would be some of those big learnings, do you think?
Yeah, good question. Do you know what? I think the first time we scaled that business in my match tech days, I think we were all so young and naive. We didn't really know what we were doing, which sounds awful. But we didn't know what could go wrong and we didn't know what could go right. We just had a lot of great energy, a lot of willingness. Everyone was kind of wedded to the same goal and ambition, and a very special culture. And I'm always cautious with this because you hear often businesses say, our culture's like a family. And that's not good, right? Because families are unconditional love and you unconditionally support your family regardless of what they're going through. And when you run a business, you can't unconditionally support people.
No.
But it was probably as close to that as you'll get, as in the support, the having each other's back. If one was down, everyone else picked them up and brushed them off. But I think probably if I look back at now, and there were years where we didn't grow, and certainly I had moments where I remember probably my third or fourth year in that business when we'd hired a lot of people, we were starting to grow the team, and then very quickly went through a high period of staff turnover. And a kind of realization that we just hadn't done the fundamentals. We hadn't really helped people understand their purpose, where they fit into the mission, what success looked like. We were just sort of plugging in more bodies and just thinking, well, we'll just keep growing here forever.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a misplaced sense of confidence, probably in our ability to grow and my role in supporting people to grow. And that was tough. That was, I was probably in my mid-20s and facing a real crisis of sorts around everything I'd kind of believed and understood, and having to be quite self-reflective. And I think my takeaway from that I've subsequently tried to apply since is it's scaling when you know that you can afford to scale. So you're not putting people and things at risk, because ultimately when you scale, somebody's made an investment. Either the business has made a cash investment to wanting to scale that business, or people have made a career investment to join you to become part of that journey. And unless you're really clear, or you've got the runway of cash to sustain that, you're immediately under pressure from day one. And that's probably where we were wrong in that business. We put heads in too quick, and then had to get results much quicker than we needed. So it's trying to get that sustainability. And then once people are on board, really making sure that they've got that solid plan, they understand where they fit in, they've got the support, you've got both, you're holding them to account, but they're holding themselves to account around what those expectations look like. And you're keeping really close to it to help get those people up and running. And it's I'm a bit of a kind of student of psychology, and I'm always fascinated to look at some of the research that comes out. And I see these studies that talk about how, like, a Wall Street trader will move from one firm to another. And if they move on their own, it can take up to 5 years before their performance will get back to the performance of when they exited their previous company. And I think what gets overlooked, particularly in sales hires or recruitment hires, is you look at someone's results and think, well, it's just plug and play. They can lift and they can come here and they can do the same. And it's probably because you're putting a misplaced sense on the person. And they're a huge variable, but actually the environment they're in, the culture they're in, the clients they're working with, the commercial terms that they have in place with their market and their customers, has a major factor on the person's ability to be successful. And I think, again, that's probably my learning. I got very overawed by people's resumes of, they've worked at these brands and these companies and built this money and done this thing and know these networks. But actually, probably less than a third of the time does that translate into instant success.
No.
Where I have seen success is when you bring at least 2 or 3 or even a team of people that have worked together before. Because again, they know how each other work. They know that success. And I know, like, you've experienced that. I know from your business where you work in the same organizations with people you've worked with for many years, albeit independently through AMO, but you've already got that trust in the relationship and almost the unspoken rules. Actually, this is a strange analogy, but I was talking to someone this morning about the Soccer World Cup.
Yes, timely.
And I was talking about, I can't believe I just said soccer. My British passport just like burst into flames. But firstly, we were talking about it's this strange concept that most of those football players are off playing for a club, and that could be anywhere in the world, not even in the same country. And then every 4 years they come together. Well, they come together more often, but for the World Cup context, they come together, and then they're expected to perform as a team.
Yes.
But they don't actually, they may know each other socially, but they don't actually work together every single day.
No.
And we were talking about this, but in the context of why there's so many goals and why there's so many defensive mistakes. And I was saying to someone, I think it's that. I think that people just aren't used to working together. So you can't expect the same level of performance as what you see every single day.
Mhm.
in that. It's a really random metaphor, but
No, it's a good one because the way that you just described that, I thought if I put it into context of like corporate environments, you've got all of these different functions that are off doing their own work. And then for projects, you've got to bring in SMEs from all of these areas to work together. Yes, sometimes they'll kick goals as long as they're, aligned, they know what the North Star is, there's trust there. Um,
yeah,
but you mentioned just earlier around like structure. So it doesn't matter how many people you throw at something if you don't have the structural bones in an organization, which sounded like at the beginning you may not have. Same with us, we didn't at the beginning, we had to learn that the hard way.
yeah,
I always say you can't personal development your way out of a structural problem, right?
yeah.
So you need that. So it's really fascinating to see how people fit in, but with and without the necessary structures, they're not going to be able to succeed. So it really is up to leaders to make sure that that structure's there. But you touched on organizational psychology, so that's your background. What from a organizational psychology perspective, how does that come into your day to day, both as a manager of teams, but then also working with clients?
Yeah, okay. So, um, so I came to organizational psychology a little bit later in life, actually. So I didn't go to university. I kind of finished high school, and that's a different story. But I kind of didn't do it at that point. I didn't do anything educationally. I went into work and did different things, and then I was suddenly realizing through my twenties. I was successful, but I was working along all these people that had been off to university and studied and were educated and learnt really interesting things and actual proper, I guess, the theory behind a lot of the stuff that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So through my kind of late 20s, I then went off and did an open university degree in psychology whilst working. Got to the end of that and thought, this is great, but I'm not sure how I apply this.
Mm-hmm.
So I subsequently kicked on and did a master's at University of London in organisational psychology, which would have been in my sort of early 30s. And really, that kind of helped crystallize everything that I'd seen in recruitment in the probably 10, 12, or 10 years or so that I've been working in it. And was able to kind of apply things that I'd seen but didn't understand. And then start to see some of the research and the theory behind it. And if I think about the sort of 10 years subsequently to studying, I think how does that come in? It comes in, like I've just talked about, for example, when you're hiring someone, how you're setting that person up for success.
Mm-hmm.
Or had a great example recently where had a client and they were hiring a senior VP of sales. Had two final candidates, and we were talking about how to make a decision over which one to pick. And the client said, "Well, maybe I'll use a psychometric." I said, "Okay, get it, but what are you trying to measure?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are you looking for from this? Otherwise, you're going to go off and put the people through this. You're going to get another report, and you don't really know what you're measuring. It's just another thing you've measured or assessed, and it's got to be able to lead specifically to an outcome, or you need to know specifically what the right profile looks like,
Mm-hmm.
or the aspects of a right profile. Because psychometrics are incredibly predictive and really useful if applied correctly. And I
Yeah.
think that's probably the great example. I see a lot of misapplied probably practice in hiring.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. The unstructured job interview
Yeah.
has got less than 50% predictability of whether someone will be successful in the job. You just as well hire someone off of their resume without even meeting them.
And that literally is what leaders are doing every day without thinking about the impacts on rehiring and then re-advertising and the impacts on teams if the right person is not a right fit.
Correct. And I think what I also see in recruitment is a lot of bias. And bias in all in senses of gender bias or diversity bias, but even just unconscious bias.
Mm.
Somebody thinks because someone on their resume has worked for a very high profile brand that they recognize, then they must be better than the person that worked for a small business they've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not necessarily true, but it's familiarity. And that's an unconscious bias. People don't necessarily sit there and consciously think about that, but it's a reality as well. And there's a whole multitude of things I think from the world of organizational psychology that link into everything from how companies structure job descriptions to how they structure their hiring process to their onboarding process to performance management to succession planning to leadership to culture. All those things. One of my I'm going to say pet peeve, but something I hear way too often. I meet a company and they'll say, we've got a great culture. I say, awesome. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Describe it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, every Friday we have, beers and pizza and we've got a pool table. That's not a great culture.
Yeah.
You're not really describing it. And there's very, very few companies or particularly leaders of companies that would sit there and say, we don't have a good culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've never.
Everybody kind of everyone believes they have a great culture, right? And they work there, so it kind of it's self reinforcing. So it's trying to help people and say, well, what does that mean? How does culture show up?
Mm-hmm.
Talk me through some difficult moments. Actually, COVID was a fascinating time, I think, particularly for organizational psychology because it became like a social experiment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one of the conversations I was having more frequently back then than now was, tell me, how did you navigate the COVID crisis? And what does that tell you about your culture? How did you communicate with your teams around uncertainty?
Mm-hmm.
Or how did you help people that were suddenly in lockdown and
Mm-hmm.
struggling with that?
Mm-hmm.
Or how did people thrive in your business sort of through those times as well? How did you bring people together collectively to collaborate and share information? So it's kind of picking some of those specific moments, and I think we're on the cusp of the next big shift or disruptor in our world in AI,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm fascinated talking to companies at the moment about how are you integrating AI, how are you testing it in your business, how are you because I think AI is without question probably one of the biggest opportunities that we've ever seen,
Yep.
but it's also one of the biggest risks, the
Mm-hmm.
biggest threats. And I did a post on LinkedIn this week about this after an article I read, and I hadn't thought about this, but the conversation I'm hearing at the moment is, will AI replace jobs and which jobs will it replace?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's very dichotomous, right? As in, that job can be done by that AI.
Mm-hmm.
What it doesn't really factor in is that some of that job can be done by AI.
Yes.
Yet maybe 30, 40, 50% of that job still needs to be done by a human.
Yes.
So how do you essentially get the AI and the human to work together?
Exactly.
And how do you make sure that the human doesn't feel uncertain? Because the AI doesn't feel uncertain, right? The AI
Mm-hmm.
is pretty clear. You tell it what to do and it just does it. It hasn't got that same emotional need or intelligence. Whereas the human is sitting there, well, am I doing this? Is the AI doing this?
Mm-hmm.
The AI produced that result. Am I accountable for that outcome? Is the AI accountable for the outcome, or who is? Where does the buck stop? I'm seeing my job get eroded. At what point is there a threshold where I'm not required?
Mm-hmm.
So it does create a lot of uncertainty, I think, for people if we're not careful.
Mm.
Yet, and particularly when the rhetoric is, when will AI replace jobs?
Yes. Yes. And nobody has that answer. Even though
Yeah,
people like to make predictions about it. It's so interesting you're talking about this because I was in a webinar with mutual friends of ours yesterday that Thomas was hosting, and we were
yeah.
talking about the connection crisis and how that's affecting workplaces everywhere. And there was different lenses. There was a leadership lens, there was the psychology lens, and then there was the structural lens, which is where I was playing. And one of the things they talked about is how whether AI is actually creating more connection or moving people further apart. And so
Mm,
I think you're right in the sense that there are going to be some roles that will have to change to adapt to an AI environment, an AI world. But where in your mind do you see AI itself changing with the clients that you're speaking to? Because I was saying yesterday, just having Microsoft Copilot on your PC doesn't mean that you use AI, right? There's a
yeah.
very big difference to integrating AI into our everyday. So, what skills do you think will become more
Mm.
valuable, and what are you seeing with clients in that space?
Yeah, interesting. So there's a couple of things there, by the way, and I compare it to kind of what I touched on earlier, coming into a business world where suddenly the first few parts of my career was very traditional, very, very bricks and mortar and fax
Mm-hmm.
machines and the post and
Mm-hmm.
manual, right? And then suddenly coming into a world where I'm using technology. And it's a bit like kind of suddenly getting Excel when you had a calculator.
Yeah.
And you don't use Excel for every calculation, right? You still use your calculator for the
People were
basics.
terrified. People were terrified when calculators came out.
Yeah, that's right. So what am I kind of seeing at the moment? I'm seeing that definitely curiosity from companies. They're kind of playing with AI. They're trying to find opportunity. But what I'm actually seeing at the moment, oh, there's so many things I'm seeing. So one thing I'm seeing is a lot of noise. AI is creating noise for most businesses. So
Yeah.
as a recruitment company, if we post an ad, we'll get 800 applications.
Wow.
Most of it's AI generated. Most of the time, the candidate doesn't even know they've applied for the job because a bot's done it, or they've
Oh,
used an app that the skills are not correct because the AI has hallucinated and added those skills because that's what the job required.
wow.
And then you just end up with a really bad customer experience because there's no way those candidates are ever going to hear back, or most of them are ever going to hear back, or a human's going to read the resume.
Mm.
So that creates frustration. So it just creates annoyance. If I take it outside the recruitment context, I was talking to one of the Melbourne City Councils a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying that since AI, the number of inbound residents in that city council that now complain about things has just gone up like two, three times.
Oh, wow.
You think about it, your bin is due to be collected on a Wednesday. You go out, it hasn't been collected for whatever reason.
Hmm.
you know, Someone comes back, they get ChatGPT, they get it to find the bylaw, they write an email, they send it off. The
Hmm.
council then has to reply.
Hmm.
So then what happens? The council goes out and invests in AI, probably sold to them by the same company that's selling the consumer the AI to create the letter of complaint, and
Yes.
they'll charge them a token in order to then triage. So then what happens is, so you've got AI being answered by AI,
Yes.
the consumer paying for the AI advanced version to do that, and then the
Yes.
council paying for AI to respond. So what
Yes.
happens? City rates go up,
Yes.
and no human's talking to another human.
No. No.
Um, and then all we end up with is just angry people, frustrated by the world, and an ability to vent and get that noise out there.
Yes.
A council kind of legally obliged under bylaw to respond to those people as well.
Yes.
But nothing changes, nothing moves, right? So that's probably how, I don't know how we move beyond that. And I know I've
Yeah.
probably gone away slightly from your question around skills
No,
and what's
no,
what's kind
it's
of
really
valuable,
relevant.
but I
Very
think at the
relevant.
moment it is like a bow wave
Yeah.
of, and it's a bit like, to me, it's a bit like when kind of big data. We got overwhelmed with all the data. We suddenly realized that
Mhm.
organizations, when they move from physical records to electronic records in their business, they suddenly had all this data. They collected all these data points about their customers and their markets and their supply chain and their everything, right? And then had to store it. So they went and paid for cloud storage to go and store a
Mhm.
load of data that they probably didn't even need to collect in the first place and couldn't use because they hadn't stored it correctly.
Mhm.
Yet Amazon Web Services and all these other companies are collecting a fee every time they keep storing and they truck up another terabyte of data.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that it's just interesting how much I think demand in the market's driven by the tech solutions, but we don't necessarily truly
Yeah.
have the problem.
100%, and that's exactly where one of the points that came up yesterday was, as in the people are being forgotten, change is being thrown at them. We're neglecting structure, we're neglecting governance, we're neglecting the human experience, and then yet we're just focusing purely on technology. And we all know starting with a change from a technology base is not the right thing to do. So yeah, it seems like it's creating that example you just gave with the councils is fascinating because in corporate, in some client engagements, I've seen someone uses Copilot to find out answers to a question that they should really probably know themselves. They then write the email and they send it to the line manager. Sorry, send it to legal. Then legal puts their 2 cents, but they've used ChatGPT, and then both of those write a response. They send it to the line manager, and the line manager says, "Just a minute, I'm going to check it through Claude." So all three of them not talking to each other. They probably could have solved for that in 15 minutes, but instead it took 3 days. So
Correct.
productivity gains are not being compensated by bringing new technology. So this is really a good connecting point for me around, you talked about COVID, and we talked about the workplace, and we talked about flexibility. I'm curious to know, how do leaders in this environment where certainty isn't possible,
Mm,
how do they build trust? Because I feel like
yeah.
people are losing faith and trust in their leaders and their organizations.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think I think trust has always come from, and this is probably more, again, how I've seen leadership change, by the way, in the last 25 years.
Mm.
I think leadership's much more now about vulnerability, about openness. I think the old, almost like headmaster, head teacher, leader that kind of existed in business at the end of the last century and kind of coming into this, I think that's gone, and
Mhm.
that's a good thing. But I think that's where trust comes from. I think leaders that can connect with their teams and say, hey, look, we're trying to do this. We don't know how it's going to play out. Or we want to test this. We don't know if we've got this right, we've got it wrong, but we've got a kind of working hypothesis about what we think will happen if we test this.
Mm.
And not necessarily feeling the need to have all those answers as
Mhm.
well,
Mm.
but to engage people. And it potentially goes back to your previous question. You were asking me about skills.
Mm.
And one of the things I was just going to observe where I'm seeing some of the biggest gains in AI
Mhm.
are when companies are hiring people from other organizations
Ah.
in that first 90 days, basically saying, what lessons have you learned from your previous organization that you think we could benefit from?
Ah, that's a great question.
And I'll give you a really good example. We, into the business here, about 3 or 4 months ago, we hired a maternity cover
Mhm.
for our ops manager.
Mhm.
And our maternity cover has come in, and I said, look, first couple of months, just get familiar with how we do things. What's interesting now is every week she's coming to me and saying, hey, you know that we can just use Zapier and it will just update this spreadsheet
Mm.
that I'm spending a day a week on. Or do you know that we can do this with AI and it will give us this report and this. And it's all different things. A, she's got quite a good mind for it, but B, it's stuff that she's seen other places. But someone coming in with a fresh pair of eyes, and a maternity cover is actually perfect for it, right? Because there's no real kind of threat to the person from before, and it's someone kind of coming in. So we've seen huge gains, and she's probably carved off 25-30% of the efficiency in that working week with the
Mm.
stuff that she's brought to the business. Now, we're not saying awesome, you can now do the job in 3 days a week. I'm
Yeah.
actually saying go and look at other stuff we're trying to do in the
Yeah.
business. What other problems have we got? Or these are the things that are keeping me awake at night. Maybe go and play with this,
Mm.
or go and test this tech, go and see how it overlays. So it's leaning more into it and seeing that we've got someone there clearly in the business that's a champion and an advocate for that way of thinking,
Mhm.
and someone that can bring new stuff to our business. So I think I think that curiosity, that learn from the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked, being prepared to kind of challenge the norm. I think when
Mhm.
someone's been doing a job for say 5 years, it's very hard for that person to sit there and reimagine how could I do my job differently.
Yes. Very, very
Um, how
100.
could I reprocess my job or process engineer my job?
Mm.
And then what else would I be doing? Because most people, they kind of get into a groove in their job where they comfortably fill up 40, 45 hours, 50 hours a week with their job. And it kind of naturally kind of fits together. And it's very hard, as I say, to kind of imagine efficiency.
And there's got
Uh,
to be a willingness too, right? There's got to be a willingness. It takes
yeah.
a certain type. I mean, I'm dealing with some clients who have challenges with certain staff members who've just gotten too comfortable, and they don't have a desire to learn more, to do more. They're getting paid well, they're comfortable, they've been there for a really long time, and it's like I don't want to change. And I see that with some leaders when it comes to AI as well.
Yeah.
I feel like AI, you can add any word, AI, agile, whatever, and organizations typically have like this top down mandate, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And then the change is just thrown on the people. And then unless people take initiative, like the candidate you just suggested, they're often struggle a little bit because the organizations aren't ready and set up for that. So on AI, from what you're hearing and seeing, and you speak with a lot of different clients, where should organizations be embracing AI, and where do you think they should be cautious? Whether it's recruitment related,
Mm.
like that example you gave before, or more broadly?
Um, I think probably what I'm seeing at the moment, the people that are getting the gains are the people that are trying to power their humans with AI,
Mm, hmm.
and they're finding those kind of early adopters, um, and they are within a controlled environment, saying to them, "Let's go play.
Yeah.
Let's not try to second guess where we can see productivity gains, or what we think, or we've heard someone else doing, and we're just going to copy
Hmm.
that and
Hmm.
do the same thing." But it's kind of finding people with that mindset. Not, there's always going to be people in the business that are a bit more change resistant,
Yes.
and a bit more comfortable and a bit less comfortable with the tech. So that's kind of what I'm encouraging. Or when you're hiring people, have you got the appetite? Have you got the bandwidth for change at this point? Are you ready for it? Some businesses are just in a phase where they just need to keep getting the results. They haven't got time to transform or this phase, but other companies do need to transform. So I think
Are organizations, just on that point, are organizations, when they're asking you to recruit them new staff, are they asking for you to look for AI skills or capabilities?
not sometimes. Yeah, I mean, for example, I'm recruiting a role right now, which is a pretty well-known Australian family-owned business, pretty big, work across the whole of Australia. And I would say quite a traditional company. So it quite surprised me when the CIO reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to bring someone in as a BA." They didn't know what else to call it, but essentially to sit and deeply understand our customer journey from acquisition through
Mm,
to onboarding, through to kind of post-relationship management, look at our sales process. But we need the person not to come in with technical skills, but we
mm,
need someone that can come in and really, truly map out the business process that our tech team can then work with, and then start to figure out some ways that we can test some tech.
okay.
So I thought that was a really interesting way of coming at it.
Hmm.
So going out and thinking again more about the business process and the business problem as opposed to the tech solution.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've said this to you before, right? One of my favorite quotes in business is fall in love with your customers' problems, not your solution.
Yeah, 100%.
And probably my pet peeve with most AI products and most sort of tech products in the market is they love their solution.
Yeah,
They'll come to you and say, "Yeah, this AI will do this, this, and this, and it will change your life, and you can get
yeah,
this efficiency." And my
yes,
question always to them is, "Well, what problem have I got? What's keeping me awake at night right now?
exactly,
And where does that sit within my top five strategic priorities?"
exactly.
Because we've all got problems, but if they're not on page one of your
Yes,
problems, don't try and solve it,
exactly.
because you're gonna have to invest a lot of energy. But if you can see something where there is opportunity,
Mm,
and it is say a number one strategic maybe you need to acquire more customers, or maybe you need to give better customer experience, or
mm.
whatever that can be. Focus on that kind of AI problem, because it's going to have a real significant impact.
It's so interesting because I'm seeing the same thing when it comes to sort of like project management software companies. Every person out there comes up to me and says, we've got this AI. They just add the word AI, and it might just literally be that they've integrated with Copilot, and there's nothing special about it. So you're right. You said earlier, I think it's a lack of clarity and awareness on these things. So I feel like for a lot of leaders I talk to, that they are unsure and maybe unaware of the things that they don't know. So they're really struggling to
Mm,
balance what is AI real and what is AI myths, and trying to get through that, navigating that path, and really trying to get through that. I think one of the things that would be really good to understand is, you gave a really good example before of the 800 applicants applying, which are
yeah,
probably, like you said, bots applying on their behalf. How do you solve for that? You can't surely have someone sitting there screening 800. And I hear a lot of
right.
complaints of people saying, a recruitment bot. Applied using a recruitment bot, and then the recruiter used a bot just to screen me after 10
Yeah,
minutes. So, like, can you shed some light on
yeah,
that?
yeah. So a couple of interesting things, and this is how I potentially see the job market starting to shift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is that we're just advertising less jobs.
Mm,
So because it's just not efficient for me to say to one of my team, "Hey, post up an ad and get 800 applications," because even if they looked at every resume for 30 seconds, that's 400 minutes of work, right? That's
yeah,
6.5 hours of their
yeah,
day. No
yeah.
one's no one's got that attention span,
No,
and no one's got that level of interest. And if I gave them the same 800 resumes the next day and said shortlist it, they'd come up with 20 different resumes.
exactly. Yeah.
So there's no real quality in that experience. So firstly, it's advertised less. I should also add, and this is another interesting point, that pre-COVID, to post an ad on Seek cost about $40.
Mm-hmm.
Post-COVID, it cost more like $400.
What's
So
driven that? Do you know what's driven that increase?
um, Seek have got different pricing models these days,
Mm,
and it's more, they kind of call it like Uber pricing. It's supply and demand.
okay.
But I'm always reluctant, and I always say this to people when you kind of hear Seek saying, "Oh, the number of ads on the platform are down year on year."
Yeah.
Ask two questions. Firstly, is that their pricing model? And is that because AI is generating a load of crap in response that people don't want to pay 10 times the price to get four times the crap?
Yes, absolutely.
To summarize that in short. So I'm always very cautious when I hear those bits of data. I think it's a good example of misleading data. So firstly, I think as a recruitment business, yeah, we are trying to taper back from advertising,
Hmm. Hmm.
focus more on old school recruitment, knowing our networks,
Hmm. Yes.
knowing uh, knowing people that know other people that are good people. And what I'm starting to see increasingly are clients reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I've got this pain point, got this problem. Do you know anyone?"
Yes.
Great example. 3 weeks ago, had a CEO reach out to me. Really fast growing business, need a GM of operations.
Hmm.
Got on a call, took the brief. During the call, I said, "Hey, I think I know someone that can do this." Talked about the profile, showed him the profile. She started this Monday.
Oh.
Like, role never went to market, never got advertised.
Hmm.
So my advice to people when they're looking for a job, if your only tactic is to sit there and apply for online jobs, you're not going to find a job, or
Yeah.
your chances of success are minimal.
Yes.
If there's 800 applications, 0.25% are going to get an interview.
Yes.
So it's invest in your network. LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful tool to reconnect with people you've worked with, worked for,
Hmm.
worked alongside, worked as vendors, worked as partners, worked as suppliers.
Yes.
Talk to those people. Connection. We talked about connection earlier. Remind them. Say, "Hey, I'm thinking, looking for my next opportunity. Do you know what's going on? Have you heard about anything?" Or look at where people that you've worked with have left and where they've gone to other organizations, and look at those companies too.
Mm.
So if I kind of look at recruitment 25 years ago, you didn't have LinkedIn, you didn't have Seek. You relied on networks. You relied on recruiters that you knew, and relied on the people in your network. And then we kind of ended up with all this white noise. Here's a scary statistic for you. In Melbourne, there's 3.8 million people on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
Um, Australia's got the highest adoption of LinkedIn anywhere in the world.
I believe that. I believe
Um,
that.
so to get noticed out of those 3.8, 3.6, whatever it is, sorry, number of people, it's pretty difficult.
Really? Yeah.
So
Really?
you've got to lean into your networks. You've
Yes.
got to look at the people you know, because you will people I meet that have worked with hundreds, thousands of people in their careers, and they've lost touch. Well,
Mm.
use LinkedIn as a vehicle to reconnect with those people,
Mm.
and ask, say, what are they seeing? What are they hearing in the market? Build relationships with recruiters.
Yes.
There's lots of us, but figure out, who you want to know and get to know them. But equally, don't just expect because you sat there and took 10 seconds to quick apply, that's always going to get a response. It's just not
Mm.
realistic. And the sheer
Mhm.
volumes that they're dealing with. And I'll probably get shot down because people don't like hearing that. And the perception is recruiters are sort of lazy and we never hear back from recruiters. There's no question there's elements of that in my industry. And it's the worst thing about my industry. There's no question. But there is also just a sheer volume issue
Mm.
that's, I think, only going to get worse.
Mm. Absolutely. And just the time, like you said, that it would take, especially knowing that maybe a large portion of that is just either completely not a fit or just genuinely rubbish. I understand what you're saying because, as you know, we reached out to your team this week as one of two contacts to say, do you know anyone? As opposed to advertising ourselves, which we typically do, but now, very costly, it's time consuming. It's far easier to go through someone that you trust. And that's why I think one of the skills earlier, we're talking about skills in an AI world, networking, that interpersonal skills is going to be the most important, most valuable thing. And I think a lot of people going back to that hybrid working, I think those that spent a lot of their COVID years working from home and maybe are not trying to rebuild that up the way maybe we did early in our career might struggle a little bit to build that network. So I think that's a really good advice. And yeah, really good to get that behind the scenes look of how you're dealing with it. So thank you for sharing that. On organizations and I guess leadership in general, and the fact that there is obviously, I guess, two questions. Do you think it's a candidate market now or a client market? Where do you think the shift is?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think it's probably specific to job types.
Okay. Okay.
So, for example, I think a lot of the big enterprises in Australia have made quite mass scale redundancies.
Mm.
And most of those people that are laid off have been mid management.
Hmm.
And I really feel for those people because I just don't know where the jobs are. And I think they're going to have to upskill, reskill pretty
Mm,
quick.
mm,
Otherwise, we're going to have a sort of generation
mm,
of people that were probably quite successful. And I don't know where they kind of fit. And I think that's where AI potentially removes the need for mid management, by the way,
yeah.
as a layer. And then there's also probably a lot of people that have gone and built careers as, say, software developers. And I just
Hmm.
don't know, and or content creators or marketing people. And some of those careers are going to come under pressure from AI.
Mm,
On the flip side, you see people that have got machine learning and engineering or cybersecurity or data engineering or some of those kind of skills that are highly in demand right now.
yeah.
And they can solicit multiple offers and some incredible salaries as a result.
Mm,
And the other thing that I think about a lot is that, and this is very specific to Australia, is modern Australia in the context of the last few hundred years or 100 years or so has been built on migration.
hmm.
And if you look at the demographic shift in that migration, I didn't realize actually I was reading a book about the history of Australia recently, and pretty much before like the 1970s, it was only actually Europeans that could emigrate to Australia.
Okay.
There was certain laws, and again, I'm not an expert on this. I've got a very small amount of knowledge, but that's why you kind of saw lots of Brits, lots of Europeans, lots of Italians, lots of Greeks, etc., particularly after the Second World War. And then through the 1970s, they opened it up, and that
Yeah.
opened up the ability for people to move here from India, from China, etc. But if you look at it, the latest data from the ABS for the first time in history, people that were not born in Australia that live in Australia, India is now is overtaking the UK.
Wow. Yeah.
And where I'm going with this, if you think about a lot of people that moved here from Europe, a lot of tradespeople, a lot of sort of different skilled workers that were needed in the economy at the time. If you look now at probably the latest migration, it's lots
Mm,
more STEM, lots
yeah.
more technology.
Yeah.
You're not getting. This is an assumption, but I can't imagine you get many plasterers moving here from India or
No.
bricklayers,
No.
um,
That's
for
a good
example.
assumption.
That's a huge stereotype, and I'm happy to be proved wrong on that. But my assumption is most people are coming here with degrees in computer science and etc. What that does mean is that our talent pool in Australia of people with technology skills is
Yeah.
growing rapidly.
Yes. Yes.
I think something like 2 million people migrated to Australia in the last 3 years, and most of those have come in with those kind of skills. So
Mm,
that does broaden the talent pool, and it does make it much harder to
mm,
compete
yeah.
because it's always evolving. If you look at other countries where, like Japan, their population is actually going backwards, or the UK, where it's really only driven by birth rate.
Hmm.
They haven't got the same dynamic where the labour market is constantly shifting and evolving and adapting to on the basis. I think there's an opportunity there, and again, it's not getting political, but the opportunity is to probably tighten up or focus more on the skilled migrant talent pools that come in and look at what the future demand is for Australia. And I think that's probably what governments try to do with a certain degree of predictability. But
Mm.
it is interesting, and that is interesting in terms of this demand. The kind of client candidate. Yeah, particularly when you think during the COVID years, the borders were closed for 2.5 years.
Exactly.
And if
Yes.
anything, the population went backwards because skilled migrants were leaving the country.
Hmm.
So that will hopefully never ever happen again, where the borders close and we end up in a lockdown situation. So it was a
Mm.
relatively unique situation, but that's only going to be an ongoing trend, I think, as the ever evolving labour market that we have here.
It's very interesting also as it ties into some of the conversations I've had around the education space and what students are studying now in universities, both locally and abroad, and also the number of students actually going straight into the workforce versus into education and that place there. I always joke, my husband's a carpenter and he always jokes that my job's going to be replaced as project manager very quickly by AI and that he's completely safe. So I said,
Yeah,
we'll see who wins that battle. Someone still needs to do all the admin for those businesses. We're almost at the end of our time here today.
yeah.
My last question for you, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, a call to action, a piece of advice, or a question to ponder?
Oh, God, that's a good question. That's a big question too. Look, I think the advice that I give people every day, every week, constantly is don't be passive, be proactive. If you want to take control of your career, if you want to know what's going on in the world, If you want to see where opportunities exist, talk to people. Don't fall into the trap of just scrolling online, letting the news inform your opinions. I think as a society, it's information overload, and it's very easy to be influenced and biased by what we hear in the news. And a lot of the news is generated really as content to sell advertising. It's not necessarily there to inform, but they have to tell you something, right, to sell something. But go and talk to people, go and connect with people in your network, connect with people that are out there doing things, hear what they're seeing. Don't just take one opinion, go and get multiple opinions. And I think it's the best way to take control of your career. It's not sitting there and waiting for something to come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that. Definitely agree with you. You've got such an interesting background. You and I have spoken many times. Every time I talk to you, I learn something new, a new statistic, a new insight. You've got really good network with lots of people in it, and you're always full of ideas and all interesting stuff. I just thought my last closing thought is, what's the least interesting thing about Anton?
What is the least interesting thing about me? Oh God, that's a tough question. So I'd like to think most things are relatively interesting. I'm definitely a super nerd. There's no question about that, right? Is it interesting? I don't really. I'm quite. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of music. I'm actually probably quite introverted. I enjoy networking, and I enjoy getting out and spending time, and it kind of fills my cup. But I'm really, I'm quite happy with my own company. I'm quite happy to stop and be quite quiet. So whether that's interesting or not that interesting, I don't know. It's a good question.
I literally, going back to LinkedIn, I know we're both passionate LinkedIn users, but I've seen it's a challenge. And they're saying, what's the least interesting thing about you? Like the most boring thing that you can think of. And I thought, that's a great question. I'm going to throw that into my next guest's podcast, and you were my next guest. So
that's a good question. But my wife would probably say that I think about numbers too much.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll come down and I'll be like, oh God, my heart rate today, resting heart rate was 58. Yesterday it was 62. She's like, what's wrong with you? What? So that's probably the least interesting thing is an unhealthy compulsion to look at data and numbers way too often.
Okay, I'll give you that then. That's going to be the benchmark for all future guests. Thank you, Anton, for joining us. Always full of insights, and I think people are really going to take a lot from this episode. And look forward to continuing conversations. But I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always great. I'd love coming on and doing this, and also just spending time talking to you again. Likewise, always learn so much, and I'm always impressed and amazed by your breadth of experience as well and the things that you do.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this with someone or rate it if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and to stay up to date with all things Agile ideas, go to our website www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope you've been able to learn, feel, or be inspired today. Until next time, what's your Agile idea?